This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Steve-o, buddy, how's it going?
That your face is kind of hairy. Like, what's going on with that?
So people can't see you or see us, and so that's a couple things. First of all, for our listeners, if you're listening and you're interested, let us know how you feel about this on a YouTube format. We're going to continue to do the podcast because you guys told us you wanted that. But as we're growing the platform, we have the option now to do a YouTube-based scenario. So offer both, and you can see live video. I can see the benefits as an example. That last one with Josh Hamilton a couple of weeks ago, he had a PowerPoint. That would have been great to use the video portion and have it on YouTube. I think too, like, some of the taxidermy ones, that's another great opportunity. And just a total segue, a lot of feedback we got is that podcast with Trevor Carruthers, Rackmaster Taxidermy, the audio quality was really poor, but the content was fantastic. So we're going to re-record that one. I've talked to Trev. He's pretty upset that the quality was so poor. We are too. As you know, we've switched into this new format, which the feedback we got is much better. So we're going to re-record that session down the road here in the next few weeks as well. So,
yeah, the only downside to going to a YouTube format is they have to stare at us, right? That's throw a lot of people off because we got faces for radio, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, this is a cool episode. We sit down with my hunting partner, Mike Kirk, and I. We're fresh off the mountain from northern BC. We did a fly-in trip to an unnamed lake in the Northwest, Region 6, and had a great hunt. You're going to hear all about it. We had some highs and lows, and some failures, some successes. I think it's just a great episode. Mike is so knowledgeable. He taught me everything I know now about mountain hunting, which probably isn't a lot. Sorry, Mike, but he did teach me everything I know. Super knowledgeable guy. One of those guys that researches everything he does to almost to a fault, really. He's so knowledgeable. So real cool podcast. I enjoyed this one. It was fun. We talked about our hunt. We had a lot of great memories on that hunt. And like any hunt too, there's those downtimes, right, where you're just dragging and just trying to get through and live to fight another day. But anyway, a real cool podcast, episode 41 with myself and Mike Kirk on the northwest mountains of British Columbia.
Yeah, it was great. For those that don't know, you guys stopped by here and spent a night before going off to your hunt. When you talk about Mike doing the research, as soon as he found out where I'm going, he had the iPad out and he was showing me markers and this is where you got to go and this is where we camped. And it was just, wow, just a wealth of information. We talked about food and packing and how to allocate it. And it was like you said, it was even down to pack fitting on me. It was right. You got to pull on this, you got to do that, and if this happens, you do this. It was great.
Yeah, for sure. No, he's a pleasure to hunt with, and one of the most researched guys I know. He's and very knowledgeable in the mountains. He's been mountain hunting for 30 plus years. He talks about his first hunt. It was funny. We ran into a couple of guys in the backcountry when we were back there, and he was telling about his first hunt where he had 2 sets of boots. He literally had the boots on his feet and then another set in case they got wet, right? So wow. That's not really the recommended procedure for any of you listening. You probably don't take Mike's advice on that. But he went through the school of hard knocks and learned the hard way. And the cool thing too with hunting with Mike is that he's adaptable, right? When I first started hunting with him, he's like, well, this is how you do it. And then there's a lot of new things that came out, talking to guys using poles. He'd never used poles before. Well, now I was on the mountain with him, and we had lightweight packs, so like 25, 30 pounds. We were just doing a day hunt. We were kind of on the plateau, just cruising around. And he had his poles with him. I'm thinking, oh, buddy, you've come a long ways. It really didn't need poles, but he still had them. And it's just that security once you get a set of poles in your hands when you're hunting. It's fantastic, right? It's really a great resource to have with you when you're out there, and just you're always on unstable ground in the mountains, right? So having those poles, it just gives you that 4 legs instead of 2. You're 4-wheel drive now, right? So
that's right. Little things you wouldn't think of, right? Being a new mountain hunter, it's like, oh, I never would have thought of bringing hiking poles or trekking poles, whatever you call them. And yeah, it's little things like that only comes with knowledge of experience, right?
Yeah. So on that note, Mike and I both had pole failures. He busted one of his poles, carbon fiber, and it was operator error for sure. He can't blame it. We have Black Diamond carbon trekking poles. They're fantastic. I love mine. And then Mike, I think mine are 5 or 6 years old now, and the cork handle, which I love, by the way, they're the cork handle version. They're starting to fail now. So I'm going to have to replace them this year. But so if anyone has any feedback for us, let us know. What's our email? Is it communications@wildsheepsociety.com? Is that what? Yeah, communications at wildsheepsociety.com. If you have any recommendations for poles that you think Mike and I could try out, let us know. I'm probably going to go back to Black Diamond. I love them, but I'd love to hear anyone's feedback on some great poles. I know Lecky's obviously does a great job on poles as well, but I've never run them. So love to hear your feedback on that if you're listening and have some comments for us. Okay, so a couple things to talk about. Steve, what's the wildfire situation in British Columbia?
Oh man, still raging. Last time we talked about how Lytton and Monty Lake have been hit, and now it sounds like 60 to 70 structures on the west side of Kelowna, Okanagan Indian Band have been nailed. Yeah, crews are still fighting hard. There's been orders. Logan Lake was told to get out. Little spots of Kamloops were on alert, and they say the word unprecedented has been thrown a lot the last year or so, and this is another great descriptor for it. It's unprecedented. We've never seen a wildfire season like this. And it goes back to what we keep touching on, like we did with John Davies in previous podcast about lack of forest management and managing for profit versus biodiversity. And it's scary out there, and our heart goes out to those that are affected and will be affected. And yeah, just it's tragic. It really, truly is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Steve. So yeah, definitely thinking about our friends out there and all the struggles people are going through. And there's nothing worse than worrying about the security of your home, right? I just can't imagine, your family's welfare, health, and safety, and then next thing, loss of personal property. So just a horrible year, and hopefully we can get some cooler weather and get some rain and see some of this stuff abated for sure. Okay, let's.
I know some of those spots have got rain over the last week, but well, you're throwing a bucket into the ocean, right? But yeah, as you said, need a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so segue now. This past weekend, we had our Wild Sheep Jurassic Classic in Chilliwack. Another fantastic event, raising money for wild sheep in British Columbia. This year, COVID affected things. We had to cancel the Jurassic last year, sadly. This year, we pared it down a little bit. We ended up with 11 teams instead of we had 22 teams, and we normally run 28. So we're 6 teams short this year. And basically what happened is there's just some people that couldn't commit with COVID. A bunch of our American friends couldn't make it up just with all the regulations and everything that needed to be done, and requirement to be vaccinated, and everything just couldn't come together. So a few cancellations there, but still a great weekend. Fantastic. Great support from Great River Fishing Adventures, and a bunch of us volunteers out there working hard and just putting on a great event, and just great to see so many people getting together and celebrating wild sheep and raising some money for conservation while we're at it. Yeah,
raffle sold out. The Seiko raffle from Steiner and Stoger, great new sponsors we brought on board, and truly thankful for them. And yeah, raffle sold out there as we expected. It's always a great surprise though when it does.
Yeah, it's nice, right? That was a full donation, like you said, from Saco Canada and Steiner Canada, and we sold tickets on that, and that nets us about $20,000 through our gaming account. So, and that money's all going to go back to the Fraser River Project in Region 3 and Region 5. And just such a great project to support wild sheep conservation. Again, that Fraser River Project's our biggest fiscal commitment ever for the Wild Sheep Society of BC. I think we're at 99,000 over the last 2 years we put into that. And then this is just another extension of that. Abbotsford Fish and Game jumped on. I think their donation towards that Region 3 project was $17,500. And we're going to do a call to action through our membership and see if people want to jump on board to further that, because we're fundraising for the next 3 years to continue our conservation work in the Fraser River there. So yeah, overall, just a great success, great weekend on the Fraser River, and just so much fun raising money for wild sheep.
Yeah, absolutely. We say it all the time. It's the heart of the Wild Sheep Society. Where this money is going, that's where the Wild Sheep Society started, and it's near and dear to our membership's hearts as well, and we know that.
Well said, Steve. Okay, so episode 41. Kyle Stelter, Mike Kirk sitting down to talk about their Northwestern BC stone sheep hunt. Enjoy.
If you looked up the words conservation superhero in the dictionary, you would see a picture of our friend Omer from Precision Optics. A tireless donor and supporter of all things wild sheep, Precision Optics, located in Quesnel, British Columbia, truly stands alone in the high alpine. From optics to rifles to outdoor gear and a knowledge that cannot be surpassed, toss in that killer smile and you have a total conservation package. Precision Optics, we are truly thankful for the support you show us every step of the way. Find them online at precisionoptics.net or in Aroma Foods, located just off Highway 97 in Quesnel, BC.
Michael J. Kirk, Steve something Hamilton. I don't know what's your middle name, Steve?
Starts with a T, ends with a T. Isn't what you think it is.
It's yes,
yes, got it. It is.
So Mike and I just got out of the bush, came off the mountain. We got home 2 days ago, did the marathon drive home, 24 hours on the road and back to the South Coast, and had a very successful stone sheep hunt in northern British Columbia, Region 6. For those of you from outside of BC, that's the northwestern part of the province. So Region 7 is over on the east side. West side is Region 6. It's more coastal. We're 200K off the coast, Mike, 150K off the coast, pretty close to the coast anyway, right?
Yeah, definitely within the coastal climate effect for sure.
Mm-hmm. I thought you said you didn't get a sheep. You said successful.
Dude, is that your measure of success?
For a sheep hunter, yeah. I see all these first timers coming back, and they're posting pictures of doll sheep and bighorns and stones. I'm like, what the hell? These guys make it look easy. So isn't that the measure?
Actually, Kyle's measure of success is spending 2 weeks with me in the mountains. So every year successful.
That's a whole other podcast that we are charging admission for.
Anyone that can spend 2 weeks in the mountains with Mike and last that long, it is definitely a success. There's no question there. So
yeah, that's a long haul.
Anyway, I guess where we're going with this is Mike and I spent a lot of time chasing stone sheep around, and there's a bunch of things on that trip, and I wouldn't consider us experienced sheep hunters when we look at a Clay Lancaster or a Shane Pallister. But we do spend a lot of time in the mountains. We go every year. We chase sheep every year. So we're going to tell you some stuff on this podcast that worked for us, that didn't work for us. But if Clay or Shane tells you something different, listen to them because they're the professionals. But that said, Mike and I are DIY. We're do it ourselves, backcountry guys that go sheep hunting every year, which is a little different than a guided hunt. In the sense that we're doing ourselves and we don't have that infrastructure. So it's a little bit of a nuance there. So guys that are on guided hunts, you may pick up a few tips on this. And then for guys that are DIY, guys that are going on their own sheep hunt, this is sort of kind of how we're our approach and kind of our outlook, which again, if you've got the support of a guide outfitter, you're obviously going to be a little bit different than what we do in the backcountry there. So anyway, Mike and I talked about this and we thought, we had some really cool experiences. We're going to talk a little bit about our hunt. We're probably going to break this up into 3 different podcasts. So we're going to, part 1, we'll talk about the hunt itself. And we'll talk about some of the things that happened and some of the things that, problems we had or issues that came up. And then we thought we'd talk about our gear, and we kind of dive into that. And we've got some new gear pieces. We need some new gear pieces that we'd like to get, stuff that we're looking at. We'll do some name dropping on what worked for us. Doesn't mean that there isn't a better system out there, but kind of what we used and what worked well for us. And then in the third one was kind of some tips and tricks, some things we learned. Every year we go into the bush, we learn something new every year. And I think that's pretty common. Talking to even experienced guides, they're always learning stuff as well. So really stoked. I'm glad you could make the podcast, Mike. And just have to say, it was a great trip. I had such a great time. And Steve brought up a good point. What's the measure of success on the stone sheep hunt? So Mike, what's the measure of success for you? I'd just like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. Well, I think that's an evolving sort of thought process. When I was young, the measure of success was going north and maybe coming back with a bit of meat and taking in the surroundings, the wildlife and the mountains and stuff. But as I aged, my sort of expectations for a successful hunt, I guess they would say they evolve and age as well. Now, a successful hunt is part of the planning process. Is definitely a big part for me. Like I enjoy sort of planning it and letting that plan come to fruition. And if I can meet those expectations in itself, that's a successful hunt. That's one portion of the successful hunt. And let's see. So as far as coming back and feeling fulfilled, like I went up there and had a great time. I think pretty much almost every year now, regardless of the outcome, whether we have sheep meat in the freezer or not, to me, it's a successful trip. This year we came back with, unfortunately, with no meat in the freezer. However, I think Kyle and I can both conclusively say it was a great trip, as Kyle's already touched on. Just getting in the mountains, regardless of the weather. Obviously, we always want the weather to be pristine. The sheep hunters are like farmers. It's either too much rain, not enough rain, it's overcast, or it's too sunny. And this year, for the first few days, it was the heat of the sun on the mountains, which definitely affected the game and had them all sort of screwed in tight into the mountains. But yeah, so in retrospect, I would say just getting into the backcountry, seeing new country. To me, I guess I'd like to think of myself as an explorer at heart, and I think Kyle would attest to that. I'm not great at sitting around and waiting for the rams to come to us. I always have to see what's, I always have to see what's over the next mountain. And if I can see new country, new vistas, and just experience the mountains, to me, that's a successful trip.
Yeah, right on. The interesting thing, one of the things that I love and you love, I know we talked about this, is seeing grizzly in the backcountry, and not too close. Like we seen one last year at 100 yards. That was a little too close. And the year before, I think it was 12 yards. We seen
exactly
seen that one. that was a little close, but this year we didn't even get our eyes on a grizz, which was interesting. They were there. We seen a lot of sign, but it seemed they were wholly nocturnal because we just never. There was a ton of moose sign, ton of grizz sign, ton of wolf sign, and we never seen any of those three animals, right? So very interesting. But the cool thing we did see is we seen some awesome stone sheep, some rams, some ewes, some lambs, and just anecdotally where we were, there was a really good lamb recruitment there. We seen a number of ewes with lambs and stuff like that. So that was fantastic. We seen a number of bands of rams, which was awesome. And then I was packing a goat tag, and we wouldn't have had too much trouble fulfilling that tag. We had two billies at 25 yards, and it looked like they were ready to take us on. But in the end, I guess they realized that they weren't going to mess with Mike and I. But it was very cool. So
yeah, in typical Kyle Stelter fashion, the mountain ungulates stalked us.
Awesome. Yeah, and if anyone knows the backstory to that, and if you're listening and you email us and tell us the backstory of the ungulate stalking us, what that means and why Mike said that, we'll send you a WSSBC hat. So that's a tough one. And I don't think we've ever had on the podcast. So it might be a buddy that knows the story or something like that. But if you know the backstory, and we'll share that at a later date on where that story comes from. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about planning this hunt, Mike. Like you talk about the planning aspect, and that's, we've hunted together now since 2009. I think we started hunting together. Actually, 08, maybe it was. Yeah, 08. And we've kind of had these different experiences, and I feel that we have different strengths. And one of your strengths is definitely the planning aspect of it. You always have everything meticulously laid out and everything like that. So on that note, how important it is to be flexible when you're going on these trips, and you might know where we're headed with that. And obviously, we're not going to talk any lakes or where we flew into. We're talking about northwestern BC, but talk about our plan, where we're going to go, and how you spent the hours and hours planning it, and then the outcome of that.
Sure. So, as you know, Kyle and Steve, you probably are figuring out now, but I generally enjoy the planning stage. I'm all over Google Maps. I can conservatively say I probably spend 100 to 150 hours per annum on Google Maps, or Google Earth. I just love doing it. I like finding these the horse trails that may not be advertised, or maybe someone hasn't told us about. I like finding. Well, the initial stage is I pick a lake. Kyle and I will head over a coffee or a beer. We'll talk about what we want to experience. And generally, we like to go to areas that may be less popular, maybe on the fringe of the stone sheep habitat, because we'd rather see less sheep and less people as well. So we pick a lake that's one of the criteria. Then in addition to that, then we're going to look at, accessibility, whether we want to fly in, whether we want to hike in. And then the planning starts, so we say this Lake X in Region 6 or Region 7. And I should back up a little bit, variety as well. We generally like to go to an area we know for 2 or 3 seasons max, and then we'll shake it up, which is unfortunate for us. It probably lowers our success ratio because, we finally figure out where the rams are and their habits and where they go when they're pressured. But there again, to touch on what I said earlier, I just like new area, and I think Kyle does as well. You feel like you're stepping back in time, and you're being a bit of an explorer. So then we'll pick a lake, and then I start the research. Start networking with friends. Anybody been in there before? Can they tell us about the horse trails? Whether there's water on top of the mountains, or whether we have to haul water up with us? All the different variables like that, and of course, sheep. What are the sheep numbers like historically, and maybe within the last couple of years? Hopefully, somebody's been in there. And then I just get down. I just start grinding away on Google Earth. I'll look at any pictures I can source off the internet, and then I'll fly right in on Google Earth, and I'll try to pinpoint that exact location. And then I just start looking at terrain around that area, because you'll have the historical areas where other people have gone in and they've seen rams. However, those aren't the only areas, obviously, that hold rams. So then I'll start looking at areas that most likely would hold rams. Like areas that look like they have good feed areas with good escape terrain above it, that sort of thing. And that takes many hours. And then, of course, we'll try to make plans with a float operator. And see if those dates are available, and if there's any competition going in there previous to us or after our departure as well, which will impact our decision on where to go. So this year we plan on going to a lake in Region 6. It's not such a popular area. However, we know it holds good rams, so therefore we chose it. And on our way up, we just phoned up the float operator just to confirm our time of departure and location, and then we were told, or Kyle asked whether or not there was competition in there, and subsequent to me checking last, yes, there was a couple parties that were already in the area. It's a rather small area to hunt. So we elected to not fly into that area, and then the frantic calls started in Smithers. Yeah, Kyle has a few more friends to tap into and their resources. So yes, flexibility is huge. So we started out with Plan A, and ultimately we ended up probably on Plan D. And even then, we flew into another lake. There was 2 other parties in there as well, and not including people who could possibly hike in. So I think one of the important things Kyle spoke to is, flexibility, and you have to be flexible. So we landed in the second lake, and as soon as within an hour or 2 of starting to climb into the vertical part of the hike, Kyle glassed 3 guys standing on a ridge above us, in the exact direction we wanted to head. So we knew there was another party flying in about an hour after us. So we humped it pretty quick. We made it about 4 or 5 hours up, decided to set up camp for the night. And then within 20 minutes, another party of 2 come behind us. Ask if they could camp in the same spot. So unfortunately, we chose this. This was now Plan C. And we had to evolve at that point as well. So, whenever we see hunters in the backcountry, my first gut instinct is, damn, more competition. But then inevitably you meet these people, and they got the same loves and aspirations as we do. And you sometimes make lifelong buddies, right? So great guys. we spent the night with them, and we decided which way we'd go, which way they'd go, and they did. So, but once that happens, that eliminates options. So now we have people to the west of us. Now we have people to the east of us. So where could we go? We went south, and we just kept on going south as far as we can. But one thing I'd like to talk about in just a little bit, we talk about the Wild Sheep Society of BC and all of its efforts and its successes. And I know I like to kid Kyle on this about having wildlife on the landscape, but I think we're having a lot of more hunters on the landscape as well. So double-edged sword, which is a great thing, for the sheep, right? Because it's always for the sheep, Kyle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, really well said, Mike. And it was interesting getting back there. And so on that note, a shout out to Carl and Nathan, a couple of really good guys we met out there in the backcountry, and really nice to spend some time with them. But so you and I continued to book her. So we ended up, we figure about 30K south, right? We went a long way. It was over a couple of days, so it wasn't too onerous. It was a reasonably good trail that we were on. It wasn't perfect, but and we did have a few river crossings which made it pretty interesting. But then we ended up getting up in the Alpine, and so it was really interesting how the first 3 or 4 days of our hunt, like you said, Mike, everything was locked down. It was so hot. I'm guessing. Well, there was times you were keeping an eye on you had the temperature function on your binos there, and it was around 30 degrees at times, I believe, wasn't it?
Exactly, it was. I'd say conservatively at times, and that was at altitude. So what was our base camp? Probably about 3,500, 4,000 feet. So yeah, 30 degrees at that altitude is pretty hot.
You got temperature readings in your binos?
I do.
I have a hard time focusing mine. Like, come on, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, that was interesting. And so, for people maybe new to sheep hunting or like us, we've hunted in warm conditions like that. But this was exceedingly so. And the interesting thing is we're in an area that we knew there was sheep. A couple of reasons. We did see a few sheep. The first couple of days, we seen about 7 rams, but very high elevation, right up on the high peaks and really tied in tight. We seen a couple come down for feed one night. We seen a couple come down for some water. Other than that, they were just locked in. So we kept moving back from the lake. And we got back into some really, really cool terrain. We're up on a high elevation. We hiked all our gear up, which was a grind in itself, getting up to where we needed to be. And we're sitting there glassing, and we weren't seeing anything, but there was sign everywhere. And Mike and I started doubting ourselves. We're like, are there any animals back here? It's perfect habitat, perfect terrain. And there was tons of sign, tons of tracks. There was, sheep sign everywhere. But we just didn't see a single animal. So we sat there for 2 days. And, I was trying to rationalize, is this winter habitat, which didn't really make sense because there was fresh tracks and everything like that. And so anyway, we spent 2 days there, and eventually we just we ended up seeing 2 ewes and 2 lambs, Mike, that literally came into camp. Like, I think they were about 40 yards from our tent, which was pretty cool to see. And then we bailed out of there because we just weren't seeing anything, and went to kind of a new area within the same region. So.
Yeah, correct. I think I'm still owed a dinner on that sighting of the 2 ewes and lambs, but but yeah, no, we humped it up to that pass and we set up camp. Like you said, it was a grind in itself. And what we saw to the south, there's no horse trail that took us in there. It was just purely grinding through the buckbrush and the northern spruce, which, as we all know, if you spend time in the mountain, that's grueling in itself with your heavy pack. Made some elevation, a couple thousand feet over the valley floor, set up camp. To another pass, I looked over a huge valley that ran east-west to the south of us. No horse trails going in there. So, it's 30 kilometers just getting to that point. So very little pressure, if any pressure. Possibly the outfitter will go in there every year or two. I don't know, but we didn't see any trails. But just a huge amount of terrain. It all looked very sheepy, like lots of feed, lots of escape terrain, just absolutely beautiful. What every sheep hunter dreams about all year long in January. We found it, sat on it for 2 days, didn't see one animal, and we were just baking up there. It was incredibly hot, It's like there's no shade. You're wearing sort of long sleeve shirts and a hat and a neck gaiter and glasses and sunscreen, and you're still hot. It's just unbelievably hot. So I don't blame the animals for staying screwed up tight. But it was definitely made me second guess myself, and Kyle, as he mentioned himself as well, because we just couldn't figure it out. We thought at some point they have to feed. They weren't feeding at 5 a.m. They weren't feeding at 9 o'clock at night. But eventually we did see a pattern emerge. And generally the sheep were already bedded down at first light. And then they were getting up out of their beds. I don't know, Kyle, like almost at last light, almost like 8:30. So you'd see them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then they were gone. But interestingly enough, conversely, the goats seemed to be feeding all day, but they were definitely shedding huge. They looked like really ratty. They were molting, but the sheep, we just didn't see them for 3 days. So in hindsight, would it have been better to stay in that spot for a couple of days, Kyle? I'm not sure. Possibly, but we had no idea the weather would change so dramatically as it did a day later.
Well, the cool thing is we made the move, and we hiked it over, I guess, a valley and up on top and got onto the plateau in another area. And that allowed us to see sheep elsewhere, right? So, we created new opportunities, but that was associated with a weather change. As we moved over to that new area, we got up on top. That's when that big storm hit. So just for our listeners, in the past, Mike and I have talked a little bit about this, but we use a tarp tent. We'll get into tents a little bit more in the gear part of this, but this year we took our Hilleberg, and we're grateful for that because we got hammered on top. There was a big weather change came in, and just the wind was howling. And I think if we had our tarp tent, we would have had to bail off the mountain, and we'd be running down the mountain at 10:30 at night, just trying to tuck our tails in between our legs and try and find some better weather. But so we got really hit with weather. But with that weather change, that brought the animals started moving, and we started seeing a lot more animals at that point, right?
Exactly.
Was that weather change that hit you at that picture you sent me, where that little bit of a lake with your tent on the little rise, I guess we call it, with the snow?
That was actually before that. We actually
okay.
we didn't even get any pictures up top on the second place because we went up there for the night, and it was a cool spot. We were a bit limited. So Mike, talk about your, transing the peak. So we're trying to get to a new valley, and talk about that experience. I guess when we got on top of the plateau and you went for a hike with just your, without the pack.
Okay, I guess we can talk about the limitations of maps, Google Earth, and Kyle has a cool new app on his iPhone called Fat Maps, so it gives it a few more features and functionality. So we're trying to, keeping in mind we have restrictions on where we can go. We know there's people, to the west and to the east, so we went as far south as we could go. So we're thinking, okay, we've done this valley, possibly we can skip over to a new Surrey Valley system where we know there's no trail access. So, but we just don't know whether we can make it or not. So we had spent all day changing campsites from one area to another area. And this is an upper plateau, probably at about 600 or 6,500 feet, quite high. Set up camp with the hope of getting a better view, which sheep hunters, you always know you want to get high. Spend more. Sorry.
You want to get elevation.
You want to get elevation.
There you go.
That's right. Thanks for that, Steve. So we do a few more glassing, but as soon as we set up camp, very barren area. There's not a stick of grass up there. It's just all rock and glacial till. The wind started picking up and a bit of rain. So I had a little bit of a look over the side, but I couldn't see much because the clouds were coming in. So we decided the next day I'd go on a bit of a recce, see if we could find a route into the next valley rather than backtracking 30 kilometers and then heading south again 30 kilometers. We thought we just may be able to go west about 4 or 5 kilometers along the valley or the mountain peaks. However, that ended up not to be for a couple of reasons. So wake up in the morning, do a bit of a recce. Hopefully we can find a pass as indicated by my maps I printed off Google Earth and Kyle's app Fat Maps. We should have been able to make it from one valley to the next. It shouldn't have been too much of an issue. You can usually tell by looking at one side or the other of a mountain on Google Maps how it looks, whether it looks vertical or rounded or such. But both the apps we were looking at were misleading. It looked like we could possibly do it, but we couldn't. So I get up, do a bit of a recce. It's about 30 minutes I was gone, I'd say, Kyle. And the first walk was pretty easy. Keeping in consideration, it's probably blowing 60, 70 kilometers at the moment. And I can't see too far, maybe 100 meters. And I'm making it, any sheep hunter will know that you have rocky outcroppings sometimes on the top of these knife edge ridges. So I'm making it from one rocky outcropping to the next, hoping to make it only about 300 meters. And then we could drop down to the new valley. And then we have a whole new hunting area for the next week for us. But I got to the very tallest peak of the tallest mountain, which is probably in excess of 7,000 feet, and I was crawling. I mean, the hunters, so we're ambitious and we want to get somewhere, and we probably take chances we normally wouldn't in our everyday life. But I'm crawling because I'm worried about getting blown off that peak. And there's probably a 1,500-foot drop on either side. It's maybe 4 feet wide. And in my mind, the whole time, I'm remembering a goat hunt last year with Kyle. We were up around Braylorn, and we were hiking through a pass, and we were both literally lifted off our feet with our packs on, probably 60-pound packs. And neither one of us are really light guys. And we are both tossed about 4 or 5 feet airborne. So it must have been a gust, I don't know, 100, 120 kilometers an hour. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about that experience. And so I make it to this tallest peak, and the tallest outcropping on the tallest peak, and I look down, there's a big pile of bear crap, grizzly crap. So I'm thinking, if this location scared the crap out of a grizzly, what am I doing here? So I backtracked with my tail between my legs, and I told Kyle, it's like I felt a little bad because with my encouragement, and I got Kyle up to the top of that plateau, and thinking we could access another valley, and it was a mistake, but we didn't know it until I went up there and did it. So we in the meantime, the weather kept on getting worse and worse, so we decided to pack up and go to another location, which, as Kyle suggested, it revealed some more ramps for us, which was a good decision.
Yeah, right on. So let's jump into that. So yeah, we had a lot of great opportunities. We've seen a lot of animals actually, and just anecdotally, it's worth mentioning. You touched on it that the goats were lower elevation than sheep on this trip. So the sheep were just tucked in really high, spent all their times kind of in the high elevation stuff. And the goats, you'd see them down, like they'd be halfway down the mountain feeding, right? And we had so many, we've probably seen 25, 30 goats on our trip, and numerous billies. We had those 2 billies at 25 yards, which we have photos of. We'll post those up at some point here. So pretty cool. But so on the way in, we seen a small band of rams, about 5 rams. So we never really got a great chance to age them. It was midday. They were coming down to a water source in a bowl above us. I think that was day 2 of our trip. And then I think it was day 2 or day 3. We seen 2 rams that came down and fed, but they were immature as well. But pretty cool to see them. And then we didn't see anything for 3 or 4 days. It was really quiet. We seen obviously lots of sign, lots of goats, but no sheep. And then I think it was around day 6. That's when we seen our biggest band of rams. I think did you spot those 9 on the? No, actually I did, right?
Yes, you always spot them.
I always spot them. Yeah, the one time I actually seen some sheep. Anyway, we seen a band of 9 rams up in this high bowl, and so yeah, that really got our heart going. And so, do you want to tell the story, Mike? Can you jump into that?
Sorry, you're broken up there a little bit, Kyle. Maybe a bit of a spotty internet connection on my behalf, but yeah. So Kyle saw a band of 9 rams, and from a distance, a mile or so more, we figured there was at least 2 or 3 legal sheep in there. We weren't sure if they were shooters or not, but we wanted to obviously have a closer look. In the same location, there was probably 14, I believe, goats, nannies, and kids, and maybe in that area we saw 1 or 2. I believe it was 2 billies on the same mountainside. Very limited area for feeding. It was a high mountain bowl with a lot of rock, a knife edge sort of ridge above them, and they just feed from one side to the other in the brush, which, like I said, was very limited. So we watched them, and all day long we basically went to bed with them still on the mountain, and we came up with a plan. And one of the things to take note in this particular area, it's not really conducive to morning hunts, because it's the valley. When we hiked in from the lake, you don't gain a lot of elevation. So a lot of places you'll hike in, whether it's off the highway or a lake, your initial hike in for a day or 2, you're gaining maybe 1,000, 2,000 feet from the lake. So you're almost in the subalpine, where we're still at this location. We're down at the valley. We're back in the forest. So it's a solid 3.5 to 4 hours to get to the animals. And as Kyle mentioned, they're right on the peaks. I don't think we ever saw them more than 50 meters off the top of the peaks. So if we see them in the morning, we know we couldn't make a morning stalk on them while they're still feeding, because it was 3.5 to 4 hours. And that's grinding, Kyle. We didn't take a lot of breaks on the way up. That's just going hard at it. So we woke up in the morning. We didn't see them. We figured they'd bedded somewhere, but we had come up with a plan. We thought, we didn't really pattern them, but we thought maybe they'd repeat the same behavior from the previous day. So we just ground up this mountainside and got to this particular area where we're about 350 yards away. And we just stayed on top of them we stayed on top of this bowl until dark, and they didn't feed again. So they had left the range sometime in the night. So that's the one thing that was really highlighted for me on this trip. Like, obviously, or not obviously, but potentially because of the weather, they weren't repeating any of the patterns. You couldn't pattern these sheep. They would be on one mountain one day, you wake up the next day and they're 2 mountains away. And they're always moving, never emerging in the same spot. So that made it a little difficult, but I wouldn't say we're crestfallen because we had a lot of hunt left in us, but we definitely knew there was 3 legal sheep in that band. But interestingly enough, I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I'd gone to get a drink of water the previous day when he was on the spotting scope, and came back and he says, "Drama on the mountain." So he actually saw a minor confrontation between a billy goat and a ram, and the billy goat won. And so whether that had an impact on the sheep and they left the range because there's too much pressure from the goats, but maybe that was one factor at play in that particular episode.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like, literally, we were watching this band of 9, and all of a sudden there's a goat literally right in the middle of them. And I said to Mike, I think there's a goat. And they're quite a ways away, right? I'm like, no, it's a goat. And Mike's like, no, I don't think so. Mike looks in the spotter. He's like, yeah, it's a goat. Like, it was unreal to see them in such close proximity. But I'm sitting there watching, and this big old billy, and you could tell he's just an old billy who's just black. He'd been rolling in the dirt, and just a big body, but short haired because of the time of year. And there was the big ram of the bunch was there, and he just ran him off he didn't really do much. It wasn't like they were butting heads or confronting, but he ran that ram off, and then he just went about and fed and hung out, and he was there around, and the other rams were kind of there, and then eventually they all just disappeared. They were gone the next day. So the goats were still there, but the sheep were gone. So it was interesting. Pretty cool to see it, actually. So, So anyway, we did our stock on to the no name, or the disappearing sheep. We did a phantom stock, I guess, because there were no sheep there. Got up on top, but we had that close encounter with the 2 goats. So Mike and I got up to the top of the hill, and there were 2 billies there, and we were getting in place to be ready for the evening hunt, hoping that this band of 9 would come out. And we get up on top, and these goats they're absolutely fearless. They just didn't care that we were there. And eventually they did meander off. And I think the one goat, he did stay on top. We did see him. He was about 300 yards just hanging out. He bedded down right on top, right, Mike?
Exactly. It was interesting because they looked at us as almost like they're giving us a stand down. We're on top of a mountain with another sort of rocky outcropping, which ran about 200 meters, and it was about 15 feet to the top of a vertical, on top of this outcropping. And they stood there. They just put all feet down, put their heads down, and just stared us down as we came closer until we got maybe 10 meters away, 15. I don't know. It was so close until they eventually just wandered off at that point. So we scrambled up to the top and to this plateau area, and one of them, he just wasn't concerned. The other one, he screwed off somewhere, but this one particular goat, he just kept on feeding. He wasn't even raising his head to look at us. It was that crazy.
Yeah, the pretty cool video Kyle sent me of that. I'm like, are you kidding me? And you got a tag in your pocket? How tempting was that?
I know. Well, Kyle's exercised a lot of restraint in taking a goat over the last few years, but I think these guys were no-brainers. They just looked like patchwork monkeys. It looked like a poodle shearing gone bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
Yeah. That's a Euro mount if there ever was one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So very cool opportunity there. Yeah. Go ahead, Mike. You were going to say something.
So not really. I guess that was just to touch back on the success of a trip. That was another highlight of the trip. So that's one element of a successful trip, is having that close encounter with these animals. And it's just so cool to see them up close and look at their behavior and their reactions to us, which to me was a little shocking. But I guess we've gone so far south, maybe they just don't have a lot of exposure to us or other predators, or maybe they're just in the short end of the gene pool for brains and for mountain ungulates. I'm not sure. Oh,
it's interesting too. If you recall, Mike, that we we're kind of camped on this creek, edge of the creek, and there was quite a big. There was a mountain we're at the base of that probably went up about 800 or 1,000 feet above us, and it was a rocky outcropping, and there was a goat on top of that hill as well. But interesting enough, there were game trails, and literally right from our camp, within 20 meters of our camp, there was game trails, and this goat had been down there cruising the game trails because there was goat hair everywhere. It was just, they were molting, as Mike said, and you could just see where this goat had been everywhere, and it kind of been down there. And we were just trying to figure it out. There was a grizzly cache there. They killed there was a young moose that had been killed at some point, and he cached the moose, and then so that goat was cruising around in that grizzly territory, and just it doesn't. Mike and I were trying to rationalize what was going on, why he would be down there, low elevation, right? It's not the rut. There's lots of food, there's lots of water. He has a water source up there above us, so it was an interesting perspective to see that, I thought. So
territory it was. Maybe he's fighting with some rams, right? Got his ass kicked and got pushed down the mountain.
Yeah, it looked like a goat murder scene. They were losing so much hair.
Wow,
it was crazy. The buckbrush. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have a dog that it has so much hair it sheds. It creates its own little animals every day in the corner of our house. And it doesn't even come close to these things. It was crazy.
Really?
There was literally sweaters of it along the branches.
Wow.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was insane.
Yeah. My dog sheds like a goat, as you know. That's that's insane.
Yeah. So if anybody can answer that question, I'd be interested. Why were the goats in the valley having food and water up top and no pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So we did our play on the 9 rams. They disappeared on us. So we said, okay. We knew previously, we'd seen the 5 rams previously from another bull. So we decided, okay, well, we'll go check those ones out. And now we're at this point where we have 2 days left on our hunt. We basically we got about 25K back to the lake. And I think we had 2 days left. We're getting picked up in 3 days. So we basically had 1 day to make a play. So we start heading towards the lake, knowing that there's that band of 5. And we start heading, and right away, Mike's like, sheep. Like almost instantly. We didn't get very far, and you were on the sheep. So we get all our stuff out. It's the same sheep we've seen before, but we never really got a chance to age them because it was midday, sun was in our eyes, and we never really had a good opportunity. But right away we got the spotter out, and sure enough, there's definitely one good legal ram in there that we're pretty confident about. So jump into that story for us, Mike.
Yeah, sure thing. So we'd moved positions again. So we decided to hunt on the way back, and we had a little bit of success coming in, as we'd seen 4, which were more than likely the same sheep we're seeing at this point. So we're tired. We're a little bit, I wouldn't say we're exhausted at this point, but we're definitely tired and feeling the effects of a week and a half on the mountain. And so we decided to have an evening glass. So for those of you who may be new to hunting, it's all about perspective. So if you can't get elevation, and your valley's pretty wide, try to go to the opposite side of the valley or opposite mountain of the valley that you're trying to view. So this mountain was to the west. So we found a hillside to the east, and we climbed up maybe 500 to 700 feet, which just gave us a little bit extra perspective where we could see a little bit more of the tops. And that's where the sheep were hanging out. They weren't dropping down more than 50 meters off the very top. They're feeding right on the top, sticking to the game trails. And as a lot of people know, if they stick to those trails and they move between those rocky outcroppings, you might not even see them. There's these little bowls and plateaus up there that unless you're up there, you never see. So we'd seen 5 rams, and we watched them for a couple hours, and we decided to make a play on them the next day. So one of them looked exceptional. 2 of them were maybes, and the other 2 were definitely sublegals, probably about 5 or 6 years old, somewhere around that level. So we got everything ready that night. We knew it was going to be a big day because now we're lower elevation, and this is a huge mountain. And so we're going to have to make our way through a valley bottom, a stream crossing, and then through a lot of spruce, maybe I'd say 1,500 feet of that northern spruce, which could be really tough. And then we had to make it through another couple thousand feet of buckbrush all uphill, and then last little bit of vertical, maybe 500 feet of vertical to get to the top. So we had glassed this one, but we really couldn't tell. He looked great. He looked heavy. He looked long. My guess is he was like well over 8, but there's no guarantees at that range. Especially we'd seen him there again in the evening, and he's to the west, so you're looking into the sun. So the only way to really age him and to see what class of animal he was is to get much closer. So we made our way up that mountain in record time. Hey, Kyle, it wasn't easy. It was hot. It was humid in the trees. We took 2 liters of water with us, and I think we drank all of it. Finally, all day we made it to the top, and we set up our spotting scope and our packs, and we just sat. We sat for a few hours. Then it got windy. So it was probably blowing again 40, 50 kilometers an hour, maybe gusting a little bit more. So we orientated ourselves on one side of a rocky outcropping that we could at least sit there without being bothered by the wind all day. The only upside was the bugs. There was no bugs. We'd been battling these horrendous bugs for 10 days as well. So we waited for 3 or 4 hours. And even though it was a warm day, being in that wind and in the shadow of that rocky outcropping, it got quite chilly. So I decided to go for a little bit of a walk. I guess we'd expected to see the animals before that. So yeah, I went for about, 400 or 500 meter walk, trying to stay off the skyline, just looking into a couple of different bowls. And I sat down, and I've always been told, and I've always understood in my mind that you can find sheep where you may not expect them. And one area I know I always overlook, I should spend more time on, is these under the glaciers. You have these bowls and these recently deglaciated areas where there's no vegetation whatsoever. It just looks like moonscape, and nothing would ever live there. But I've seen rams in those situations a few times, and this time it just about bit me because I was just about ready to walk along the skyline close to this bowl. And I sat down, I crawled to the edge, and I looked down, and I found the 5 rams, which was pretty exciting to me. So I looked to make sure they're all the same ones. I only saw 4, so I was starting to second guess myself because this year Kyle's the man on the trigger, and I told him I'd probably seen a legal ram. Let's go for it. So encouraged him to climb this few thousand feet. So I basically went back, got Kyle. We repositioned all of our gear to stay on this ram for the day and hopefully judge him. But so we got pretty reasonably close. Maybe at times we'd move, but anywhere between 1,000 and 1,200 meters, which should usually be ample distance to judge the animal, sort of age-wise and for length. However, with the wind, it was crazy. So we had a good scope, a Swarovski spotting scope. We had on them all the time. We had I wouldn't say the top of the line, but a pretty good tripod, which may have been our downfall to a certain extent because we're having a bit of problem. There was a little bit of wobble between the head and the spotting scope. So with that wind, it was really, really hard to see how big he was because when we weren't dealing with the wind, we were dealing with the heat waves. So I probably had my eyes on that ram for about 2 hours, would you say, Kyle? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, something like that, exactly.
And I definitely could not tell, whether he was legal or not. My gut told me he was probably 9 or 10, but you have the parallax because you're up on top of the mountain, you're looking down. He looked legal, but I couldn't confirm it for lengthwise, and we definitely couldn't age him. Sometimes with that wind the way it was, the ram it was actually hard to keep it in the field of view of the spotting scope. That's how bad the wind was. So we watched it. The 4 of the smaller rams that were with them, the 2 potential legal ones, there was 2 potentially legal, maybe around 8 or 9 years old, we wanted to have a better look at, but weren't quite so excited about. They had fed off, but due to our location on the mountain, they were below us, and we couldn't see which direction they went, and we didn't want to reposition for fear of the bigger ram seeing us and spooking him. So we just locked into that position for a couple hours, and Kyle was patient with me watching these rams. I'm like, dude, to me, it looks like an awesome ram. It looks great. It's heavy. It looks long. I just can't say whether it's legal or not right now, so that's where the ethics come into it, so you definitely never want to shoot and measure. So, and you want to be, over 100% on these animals. So we could have repositioned to get within a distance where Kyle could have shot, but with a chance of spooking this animal. So we definitely wanted to age him first prior to being put in a position where Kyle would have to set up quickly and shoot. Just couldn't do that. So where we were at is where we'd seen the rams the previous day. We knew if they repeated their behavior from the previous day, they'd have to pass us. Maybe closer than we wanted, but they definitely have to pass us. And all we'd need is a few seconds at a closer distance without the wind in order to judge this ram and to be 100%. So he could have gone three ways, and only one way he would have fed out of our ability, or he would have fed away from us. And unfortunately, he didn't get out of his bed until after 8 p.m. And he started feeding pretty quickly, or he started moving and feeding, and he was definitely on the move. So I said, Kyle, we got to make some adjustments here. So let's drop down a little bit. We had a little bit of cover. Let's get a couple hundred meters closer to where he is, because where we're positioned, he would have been on us before we know it. We had no perspective of him coming up the mountainside. He was right below us, and we had had a face-to-face meeting at about 5 meters. So we repositioned, and we're looking for him, and we saw him basically following the other rounds where we suspected they had gone, in retrospect, where we had suspected they had gone, and he was on the move. And we saw him, I think, at 500 meters, maybe a little bit less. And Kyle's got this great gun works. He spends a heck of a lot of time practicing, and I know on a calm day, it would not be an issue. It'll be a chip shot for Kyle. But, sort of that nagging sort of ethics in your back of your mind again, it's like, we just can't be 100% on this animal. So we basically, at that point, we just let him walk away. He wasn't spooked, I would say. He was just trying to catch up to his band of brothers. And so we just watched this magnificent animal walk away for about 5 minutes till he was around the corner. And unfortunately, it's probably about 8:20 at nighttime. We're 4 hours from camp, and in order to intercept him on the other side of the mountain, it'd probably taken it probably an hour to 90 minutes to get in position, which would have been after dark. So we made a decision to let him grow bigger for a year, and we retreated with our tail between our legs. But all in all, it was an amazing experience, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And just to see that quality of ram, he's so heavy, and these experienced guys, the Clays of the world, would have no problem. They would know he was legal, and we're sure he was, right? But it was one of those things where you didn't have the luxury of knowing for sure. So you always say it, Mike, if there's any doubt, there is no doubt, and let him walk away, and somebody's going to see a bigger ram next year. And I guess we have to decide whether or not we're the ones that want to go chase him, or we let somebody else get him, right? So
exactly, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, he's an animal we can all dream about until next year again, and he'll be another couple inches longer, hopefully.
Yeah, very cool. So, we peeled off the mountain. So we were about 4 hours up and about 2 hours down. And we literally got into, we're crossing the creek in the dark. I just about got my underwear wet crossing with my Crocs and no pants on. And Mike, rightly so, took the circuitous route that kept him nice and dry. But I think we got back to our camp that night about, was it 11 o'clock we got back into our bed?
Probably something around there, yeah.
It was
about
late.
Yeah.
It was pitch black by the time we got into camp. So, and then we were forced with a 21K hike back to camp the next day. So, which was interesting. Fortunately, it was downhill and fairly easy going, but and then just dreaming the whole way back about the missed opportunity on that ram, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But in retrospect, it was absolutely the right decision to make. We had that. It was a solid opportunity, but yeah, it just feel so bad to take a sub-legal ram. I never want to go there.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. I think one of the highlights of the trip too, Kyle, maybe you could speak to this, of the aggressive porcupine.
So, it's funny. I talked to Mike, and he never had much experience with porcupines in the mountains for years. And now these past 5 or 6 years, we've just been plagued with porcupines. So this particular trip, and this is super interesting. I've never seen this. And again, if you guys have had experience, any of our listeners, with porcupines with this, let us know. And if you know anything about them, but we're about 6,500 feet elevation. We climbed up on top, very high elevation, almost one of the highest points. There was no vegetation, no trees to speak of. It was, basically a deglaciated area. There was a little bit of a higher elevation lake, but there was nothing else. And there was this porcupine on top of snow. There was just a snowpack, and he was just hanging out on the snow. And it was the biggest and oldest porcupine Mike and Ed had ever. We talk about these rams with a Roman nose. This porcupine had a Roman nose. Like he was. I got a picture of him. He's ancient. So what happens? He started chasing Mike, and I got video of it. It was actually pretty comical the way Mike did it. But he was super aggressive. But I have no idea why a porcupine would be up there. There's obviously they eat a lot of trees and stuff and bark, but there was nothing for him to eat whatsoever up there. So I don't know what he was doing at that elevation. So.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Generally I look at porcupines, I feel a little sorry for them. They look a little cute, right? I'm like, oh, these misunderstood creatures of the mountains, right? That everybody wants to kill. But this particular one, he was not a pretty porcupine. Yeah, he was the old man of the mountain, and he was cantankerous. And he would, if a porcupine can charge, he was charging, but it was in slow motion.
Yeah,
Kyle's filming. I'm like, this is like a horror movie in slow motion, because he'd waddle towards me with his head down. And I would back up 15 feet or so. Then he'd keep on coming. He was relentless, right? So there was no jeopardy unless I fell down and failed to get up again. But it was pretty funny. I've never seen that kind of behavior in a porcupine before.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. That's so awesome. On that note, we've had so many different experiences. We came back to our tent one day, and there was a porcupine hanging out of our tent. But in previous years, we've had them. So we had one. I had quills in my one thermarest, so there was that experience. We had I had a Stone Glacier backpack. It chewed halfway through the belt of my Stone Glacier, and there was one. I think it was it last year or 2 years ago that he or she kept coming back to the tent, and I don't think we slept. I was so angry at the end of the night. We were chasing them off with hiking poles, trying to scare this thing off, and it just kept coming back over and over and over again. We ended up having to move because we were afraid it was going to destroy our camp, because it was doing some serious. It already chewed halfway through the belt of my Stone Glacier, so it was. We've had a lot of porcupine issues these past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, they're absolutely relentless sometimes, and I would say we've hazed them, and they just keep on coming back for more punishment. With our tarp tents, it's basically a shaped tarp with a bit of bug netting on the bottom of it. And I was sleeping, and I see this apparition / porcupine go within like 6 inches of my face as he's walking around the tent looking for an opening. So that definitely gets your attention. But I think I've seen Kyle maybe twice and Matt in how long we know each other, Kyle? Almost 2 decades, but that was one of the times. Yeah. But if we found stones, it might have been a different outcome.
Yeah. Interesting times. So back to the lake, and we finally made it back. We flew some beers in with us. So we flew in a frying pan, a stove, and we flew in some. Was it potatoes, Mike? We flew in, or what did we fly in for?
Onions and garlics.
So we decided we're gonna, in planning for our stone sheep at the lake, we'd fly all this stuff in, and Mike had talked about these potatoes he'd flown. So we didn't have any stone sheep, unfortunately, but Mike was talking about, I got potatoes and onions and garlic back at the lake. Well, we get back to the lake, and Mike forgot to put the potatoes in. So we're like, I've never been so disappointed not to have potatoes in my entire life. 14 days of freeze dried. And I was actually sad that we couldn't have potatoes, which is really sad, actually.
It is sad. I was trying to incentivize Kyle to keep the pace up. I'm like, dude, when we get back to the lake, there's potatoes, there's onions, garlic, seasoning salt. I know it's not sheep meat, but it's fresh food. I get back there, I'm like, damn.
So, and the funny thing is, you look at me and you're totally serious. You're like, do you think we could just have the onions? I'm like, no, we can't. We cannot just have the onions. It's going to be disgusting. But anyway, we flew. We bought 3 6-packs in anticipation too. We thought, okay, we'll have some beer back at the lake. So we just hiked 21K. We're exhausted. It's raining. It's wet and it's windy. It was a miserable day. And Mike and I both had a beer, and halfway through, we're just exhausted. We dump our beer out and go to bed. It's like, so we flew the beer back out with us.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess we're lightweights in that regard, but we had this huge party envisioned in our mind with sheep meat and music and a little bit of dancing on Kyle's part and potatoes. None of that came to fruition.
No, just the dancing, right? Maybe not.
Well, okay, that's a perfect segue to the question. I had a couple of people message me and go, so when are you doing a podcast with Kyle next? And I said, well, today. Well, I've got a question. So ties in with the dancing, back at camp. Your status, Kyle. You guys got married, it seems? What's that about? We see you come back into Signal. All of a sudden, Kyle Stelter is married. We know you just come out of the bush with Mike, and it kind of goes together. So chat on that a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'll yeah.
Steve, he could only deny my advances for so long.
I tend to agree.
Yeah, you've met me once.
Because
you know my allure, Steve.
Yeah, well, I do. 20 minutes ago, I did hear Kyle say I wrote it down. We hiked back to our bed. You didn't say beds. If you don't believe me, I'll highlight that in the episode. You said bed, not plural.
Okay,
25% of his backpack is a queen size mattress, but
this is devolving very quickly. Yeah, good. Yeah. So anyway, great trip. Yeah. No. Oh goodness, you guys are incorrigible. Anything else? Are we missing anything from the trip? Any other highlights, Mike? Anything we want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I guess that's for another podcast, right? We're going to talk about tips and tricks and things we may have learned, and things we may endeavor to do better next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we hit most of it. So we flew in on the 29th, got in the 29th, hiked. Yeah, we got in first thing in the morning, hiked the entire day, and then we flew out on the 10th. So we had, I guess, a full 13 days in there. And yeah, we've seen 20, 25 rams, or 20, probably. And so great experience overall. Just great to see that our northern stone sheep are doing well in that region anyway. And yeah, it was just a great trip. I really enjoyed our time there for sure. So yeah, I think that hits it on the head. Anything we're missing, Steve?
No, just it sounded like a great time, and I look forward to being there with you next year for that big round.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, he's going to be there for somebody for sure. Absolutely. So